Hey everyone, Hexlex here with some more Master Duel for you, as always. As you can tell by the title and the thumbnail of the video, we've got another deck profile for you guys today. This one, however, is going to be a lot like the last one, actually, my Bird Up deck profile, where I'm more showing off my current build that I'm experimenting with this deck, rather than saying this is the definitive build I think you should use. Especially with this deck in particular, there are some ultra rares that would be good to craft for the deck that I have not, because I'm saving some of my ultra rare craft points. We'll get more into that specifically when we look at the list. But before we look at the list, I just want to make everyone aware that I am aware of some of the audio issues that my videos have been having. My microphone tends to make me sound a little robotic sometimes. I do test my audio before every video just to make sure that's not happening, but sometimes it seems to happen in the middle of a video anyway, even though I haven't touched or unplugged or touched my microphone at all. So I have ordered a new microphone, a nicer one than the one I have. And it'll be here within a couple of days, so I'll be using this mic that I've been using for the next couple of videos, but then after that, we should see, ideally, a noticeable upgrade in quality to the audio. In any case, with that out of the way, let's get right into the deck, which I have alluded to a couple of times. You've probably seen it sitting over here in my decks that I've built. It's Sky Striker. So, funnily enough, I actually built this deck before I built even Tri-Brigade Zodiac, and definitely before I built Bird Up, because this was going to be the competitive deck that I laddered with. But I ended up pulling two Shurigs out of the, I forget what the name of the pack is. Let's take a look at the shop. It's the one that everyone tells you to get, at the beginning, which is really good too. It's still Stalwart Force. Yeah, I dumped pretty much all of my early game gems into this pack, and I ended up with, actually not even two, three copies of Shurig. So that's why I decided to go into Tri-Brigade. But before I pulled those, I'd already invested some of my Ultra Aircraft points into Sky Striker, particularly into the Mobilize. So let's go ahead and take a look at the list here. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there are some cards that I'm not using in my current build that would be ideal. One of the main ones being, let's look for Terraforming here. Yeah, so we're playing two of the field spell Airspace. Ideally, I'd have a Terraforming as well. This is really helpful because it gets more spells in your graveyard, which all of our Sky Striker spells care about having 3 or more spells in the graveyard to get their bonus effect. So we definitely want to be getting 3 or more spells in the graveyard as quickly as possible. Well, not this one, but all the other ones do. So Terraforming is really good for that. However, I don't have another deck I can put it in. That's kind of like how I'm justifying what I spend my Ultra Rare craft points on craft points, I said that right. That's how I'm kind of justifying what I spend those craft points on at this stage, with the decks I have and with my current collection. I want to save the Ultra Rare craft points to either make a new deck all at once, or on staples that I can use in more than one deck. Terraforming is useful in more than one deck, but not among cards that I currently own. It would only be used in this deck, so I'm holding off on it for now. Ideally, I would also have at least one, but probably a few copies of Upstart Goblin, which again, is just to draw one card. Your opponent gain life points is totally fine, and it's mostly to cycle into other cards and also put more spells in the graveyard. So I mean, in a perfect world, I don't know if I'd have 3 in this deck. I would have at least 1, maybe 2, possibly 3 if I could find the room, but that is something that should be in this deck, quote unquote should be as well. But again, I'm saving my craft points for more universally useful staples, and also to make another deck potentially. In any case, let's go ahead and take a look at the list itself here. We've got Maxx and Ashes, our standard hand traps. You can see also joining the hand trap brigade is a card I crafted, Nibiru, the Primal Being. Hand traps in general are very important for Sky Strikers. I keep thinking I'm missaying these words, but I'm not. Hand traps are very important for this deck because a lot of the power of this deck comes from disruption. This is definitely what I would call a control deck, true and through. So, between combo and control and Yu-Gi-Oh, it's not like one deck is one and one deck is one or the other. It's more of a spectrum, right? So on the combo end of the spectrum, we have something like Bird Up, Tri-Brigade Leerlusk, where The end board can be very controlling, sure, but for the most part, the deck is very, very combo-based, and as a result, it tends to be more vulnerable to disruption that control decks may have. Then you have Tri-Brigade Zodiac, which I think lies somewhere in the middle, probably like a little closer to the combo side than the control side, maybe like 60% combo, 40% control, something like that. But it's a little bit versatile in that you can kind of play both games, in that you do have a lot of combo potential to get these huge boards with a lot of attack points out, but you can also shift gears a little bit and, you know, kind of do a more controlling, pulled back as far as like your board presence, but overall more like oppressive board strategy. So Sky Striker here is kind of like on the control end of the spectrum. It's not really got, I mean, there are some combos you can kind of do in this deck, but for the most part, we're just controlling our opponent's stuff and just trying to keep them from doing anything while we kind of poke at them with our Sky Striker monsters. These Link monsters are all Link 1s. They are kind of the core basis of the deck. The idea is that you can either just straight up Link summon or use Raye's effect to go into one of these Sky Striker Link monsters, and then when they leave the field, you can get your Raye back. There's also Roze, who can be summoned back when a Sky Striker monster is destroyed by a card effect. It can also be special summoned when we summon a Sky Striker monster, which can be useful sometimes for making Zeke the only Link 2 Sky Striker monster. For the most part, you do want to be leaving your main zones open, though, as our Sky Striker spells can only be activated if we control... Ooh, not that one. Can only be activated if we control no monsters in the main zone. You might also notice that, though I said hand traps are important, we're missing infinite impermanence from this deck. We are using Forbidden Chalices instead, actually. In most cases, you know, you'd be playing Forbidden Chalice as like a budget alternative to impermanence, but here, Forbidden Chalice is actually slightly better because we can use it to get more spells in the graveyard, more or less. That does leave us a little bit vulnerable to monster effects during our opponent's first turn, which is something I've considered. I actually considered like doing a 2-2 split, like playing 2 Chalices, 2 Impermanence, but ultimately I think the Chalices, the 3 Chalices, are going to be better. Ideally, another one, and this is actually pretty high on my consideration for crafting list, whoops, that's pretty good in this deck in particular, is Effect Veiler. It looks like it was a bit too vague in my search. Let me see if I can... that's right, we have to click this, and then we can use... There we go. Nope, and then I spelled it wrong. Oh boy, I always misspell that word. Okay, here we go, Effect Veiler. So, this is an ultra rare craft that's actually pretty high on my consideration list because it's a hand trap. It's kind of like a monster version of Infinite Impermanence, except it can only be used during your opponent's main phase. It is, however, a level 1 spellcaster and a tuner, which is like kind of useful, fringe useful for some of these like fringe extra deck options, like Celine mostly. But, and also if I had a Crystron the Link monster that summons tuners, you know the one I'm talking about. If I had that, then not only Veiler but also Ash would be it would be good for that. It's more fringe again. Those are like kind of more fringe combos you do with this deck. I don't think they're particularly necessary, but it is a consideration. In any case, you know, we've got then the 3 copies of Raye, 2 copies of Roze. Raye is definitely the better of the two because she can recur herself whenever our Sky Striker Link monsters pretty much leave the field for any reason. Roze is still useful though. She comes back when they're destroyed by card effects, but really only then. And as you can see, the rest of the deck is all spell cards. We're running quite a few staples like Raigeki, Harpie's Feather Duster. Now, I'm not playing Lightning Storm. I am specifically playing these two because ideally we are going to be having a monster out at all times, or in this case a face-up card. We're also pretty reliant on Multirole here, which is a continuous spell card. So for that reason, instead of copies of Lightning Storm, I am playing specifically Raigeki and Harpie's Feather Duster. We've also got Monster Reborn because often one of our ways of winning is going to be by using our opponent's monsters. You might take a look at this deck and be like, well, what's this deck's win condition? Like, none of the monsters really have more than 1,500 attack points. And, I mean, yeah, we got, like, Access Code Talker in the extra deck, but we really don't even go into Access Code Talker very often at all. At least I don't. Again, I could just be playing this deck in a way, or my build could be set up in a way where I just particularly don't go into it often, but But so yeah, oftentimes one of the win conditions are going to be using our opponent's monsters, either through Monster Reborn here, through Widow Anchor, that's right, by taking control of a monster when we negate it, or by the Shark Cannon, which can banish a monster from our opponent's graveyard or summon it to our field. That monster can't attack, but we can use it to make some of these link monsters like Access Code Talker, and in that way it can help us get more to our win conditions there. So otherwise, let's see, we've got one copy of Pot of Avarice, which is good if you need more draws. It's pretty easy to fill up the graveyard because you can kind of chain, like go into each of the Sky Striker monsters and then just fill up your graveyard with Avarice, and that also is useful for reloading your extra deck. Desires is pretty good in this deck because we're not a combo deck. We can activate it pretty freely. We know Engage, it's the best Sky Striker card pretty much. It's at 1 in the TCG. It's like a Rhoda plus Upstart in one card. I see a lot of decks only using one Afterburner. I like 2 because sometimes we have trouble getting over big monsters. We don't always have Raigeki, so I like the extra copy of Afterburner. One, I don't even know what this card is called. It's the one that destroys back row. Jamming Waves. Okay, yeah, this destroys back row and sometimes monsters. We're playing 2 Airspace again. Ideally, we'd have a Terraforming as well. We're playing 3 Multirole. This card is really good because it's kind of like Spellbook Judgment for Sky Strikers, in that at the end phase we can get back 1 Sky Striker spell for every one we activated. So that's really useful, especially if we're using stuff like Widow Anchor and Shark Cannon that we can reset and then use as disruption on our opponent's turn. Very nice. Hornet Drones is another playmaker, basically. Makes a token that we can use the links to go into. Widow Anchor, very useful disruption. It's not only a negate, but it can also let us take control of an opponent's monster. It's like disruption and also a win condition sometimes. 1 copy of Eagle Booster. Very occasionally you'll use this to basically stop your stuff from getting messed with. It's really like niche though, and oftentimes if you're looking for an extra spell just to throw in the graveyard with like not Shizuku but Hayate, then you can just use this one. And then finally Shark Cannon, which is kind of like DD Crow, with the potential to summon it back to our field if we want to. Particularly useful against stuff like Eldritch, that's really reliant on having monsters in the graveyard. Extra deck, we've got a 1 Kagari, who can get us back our spells. Most often we're going to be getting back Engage, but if we need an emergency like Widow Anchor or something, we can get that back. Shizuku, for the most part, you're going to be, especially going first, but pretty much any time if possible, you're going to want to be ending your turn with the Shizuku, because she can add a Sky Striker spell from your deck to your hand. Note that that spell has to be a different name from the ones in your graveyard, so you can't add one you've already used. Hayate is useful for not only being able to attack directly, but she can send a spell to the graveyard to get us up to 3, or if you don't have a Raye in the graveyard set up yet, she can get that set up too. She can also potentially set up Pot of Avarice sometimes. We've got I don't know how to pronounce that for these. This is just a niche kind of disruption. Since Raye's effect is a quick effect, we can potentially use it during our opponent's turn, which means we can link into this during the opponent's turn and stop one of their monsters from attacking. The rest of the extra deck, honestly, isn't as important as having the Sky Striker monsters. More often than not, in my experience, you don't really need the rest of the extra deck, but we're playing like Nightmare Cerberus and Phoenix. You could also have crafted Nightmare Unicorn as well. Ideally, you would have this in the extra deck, but again, it's an ultra rare. I'm not really going to use it in any other deck, so I haven't crafted it. 2 Zeke, this card is pretty good for like just going for game. It can clear out some of your opponent's monsters and also boost its own attack. Lina and Celine are like kind of niche. They're honestly more filler than anything else for the extra deck, but like Lina can be used with Raye and to search for Raye. You could use the fire one to search for Ash Blossom. It's just going to be harder to make because we don't, like, Kagari is really the only fire main deck monster besides the Ash that we have, so I went with the Light Charmer Link monster. Celine can, be used in conjunction with the Light Charmer. She's more useful when we actually have like Effect Veiler in our deck, but again, she's mostly just filler. She's an Ultra. I wouldn't have crafted her if I didn't already have her. Finally, we have Access Code Talker, which is, if you're going to combo, just what you're going to end with. And, sometimes you might go into Lina, into Celine, into Access Code, just to have the Link 3 with Access Code. you could potentially do that. But that's really kind of what Cillian's use is for me at this point. Okay, wow, I've gone on for long enough about the deck itself. Let's go ahead and take a look at the replays next. So I've got 3 for you, and I decided to get these games in because I figured, well, whatever. We're already starting the gold season at, or rather the season 2 at gold 5. Let's just go ahead and get these in. And yeah, like I said, let's just go ahead and go into it. So this first one here, our opponent was playing... Ah, yes, this is against Altergeist, which is a deck I've not played a whole lot against, but enough to be familiar enough with how the deck works. It's kind of like... So on the combo control spectrum, I'd say Altergeist is like 70% control, 30, maybe even 75% control, 25% combo. But okay, so we're going to start off with a fairly decent hand here. Our opponent's going to be going first. We did open with the Maxx, but unfortunately our opponent's not going to be like special summoning at all, so we don't really have any disruption at the moment. This is a case where Imperm would have been better than Chalice, but I think Chalice is overall better for the deck for being a spell card. Yeah, Uju Ash, right on time there. I'm going to open up with Engage because I want to clear away some of these back row because at this point I didn't know it was Altergeist specifically. The blue kid, what's his name? This should have been a giveaway, but I thought maybe it might have been like a spellbook player. I mean, you never know, so... You can see there that we didn't link someone with Raye. We actually went straight into the battle phase and attacked. Because Raye's effect is a quick effect, we're able to use her effect during the battle phase and still attack with Hayate. We then link away Hayate for Shizuku, add a Widow Anchor for some effect negation next turn after setting our Forbidden Chalice. And I believe, yep, we do have 3 spells in the graveyard. I mostly got this for potential disruption or if my opponent played a big card to take control of it. Although, as we're about to see here, that's not our opponent's plan. I could have actually flipped Forbidden Chalice to negate this, but I really wasn't that concerned with Shizuku getting sent by the effect because we could just get Raye back. This was a very minor misplay. I should have put Raye in defense mode, but it doesn't end up really mattering. And so here we're going to draw Raigeki. I definitely don't need to use it just yet. Our opponent's going to play... I've never even seen this card before this duel, but Kunquiri? Rather annoying card. It's going to negate our attack, but we're going to use Raye's quick effect in response anyway, so it's really just going to serve as like a 2400 wall. We're going to go into Kagari here. Kagari's going to let us get back our Engage, which is going to be pretty nice because now we're going to be able to set up 3 spell cards in the grave with it. We'll attack the small Altergeist monster, which is going to unfortunately get a search for a Multi-Faker, but this Multi-Faker actually isn't going to do a whole lot for our opponent in this scenario. I am going to Raigeki this one monster away so that I can set up a 3rd spell for our Engage. Since I know our opponent's playing an Altergeist deck, obviously at this point, I'm not as concerned with saving Raigeki for a big board. Now, I guess slight misplay here. I should have technically put Multirole in one of the outside zones in case my opponent did have Imperm, which they did. I just happened to play it in the zone it was in, so that's a little bit unfortunate, but it's going to be a relatively minor setback. As always, we're going to want to end the turn by linking into Shizuku so we can get a draw, but our opponent's going to have Ice Dragon Prison here, so they're going to get to play the Shizuku from our grave and then ultimately send it away. Now here I do actually make another... I would consider this a misplay. Well, it's kind of back and forth, right? So basically by summoning... Okay, I think summoning Roze was the misplay here. I think getting Raye back was fine, but I think summoning Roze in addition to Raye was definitely a misplay here. There was no need to do it. We could have summoned Roze at any point during the next turn, and that is going to cut us off from being able to use Widow Anchor. It's not going to really matter that much in this duel, but again, if I were playing optimally, I would have not have ideally dropped Roze there. Opponent's going to search the Mulseek. We have the Ash this time, however, they have the Called By, so they're going to get the search instead. But as you can see, our opponent's running low on just cards overall, on their hand and field. And this is kind of what Sky Striker is all about, right? We're just like slowly grinding our opponent out. We're not doing any big flashy combos, but we're making consistent strong plays, forcing our opponent to use up their stuff while we're also disrupting them until they just are left with nothing towards the end of the duel. Yeah, it's funny. Actually, a lot of these Altergeist cards I haven't seen, because even though I've played against the deck, it's not been a whole lot. I'm going to try to stop my opponent from attacking with this monster, but they do have another Imperm to negate my Kaina. It's going to be fine at the end of the day, but it's a little annoying as well. But yeah, I haven't seen a lot of these Altergeist Link monsters much, because, I don't know. I've played against Altergeist a few times, but I never really see them do anything. And yeah, at this point our opponent's going to concede, because they know they're pretty much out of stuff. I mean, I've still got 4 cards in hand, 4 cards on the field. And they kind of know the inevitable is going to happen. I guess we'll just go in order here. So this deck, I don't remember what my opponent was playing. Ah, yes, this was the Blue Eyes deck. And our opponent's even got a sweet tech Slife for the Sky Dragon. That's actually pretty badass. I respect him for running that random Egyptian God card. Unless it's actually useful in Blue Eyes, and I don't know. I've never played Blue Eyes, to be quite honest. But let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got here. So this game is going to show you just how important Disruption is going to be for this deck, and how we can just single-handedly win with Disruption alone, to be quite honest. Our opponent's going to start by activating Melody. I'm absolutely going to Ash here, because it's only going to leave them with 3 cards. And they're probably not going to be able to do a whole lot with it, and indeed they do end up just passing here, so I know those 3 cards by themselves aren't able to really do much. Now here, and I'm going to pause when this happens, I'm going to normal summon Roze, and as soon as I do, my opponent's going to activate Maxx in response, right? So, normally you might think to yourself, okay, well, my opponent has so few cards in hand. If they're Maxxing, I can afford to go into 1, even 2 summons. It's only a couple of draws, right? That's actually not correct here. We're going to go ahead and hit the play button, and you'll see that here, I'm just going to go into my battle phase, attack, and then set Chalice and pass. Right, like I'm not even going to give them any draws at all, because I know, again, these cards were bricked, right? After I negated my opponent's Melody with Ash, my opponent wasn't able to do anything at all with these 2 cards. So the odds that they're going to unbrick with 1 card are pretty low, and even if they do, they only have a total of 3 cards after that. So they're not going to be able to, probably, again, I don't know Blue Eyes that well, they're probably not going to be able to make that many plays that are actually really threatening. Now, if I had gone into a summon or 2, which again might not have seemed like that bad in the grand scheme of things, then our opponent would be sitting with like 4 or 5 cards, which means they're much more likely to have plays. So, yeah, I'm just going to attack with Roze and pass, our opponent's going to draw, and then concede. So that kind of shows that this deck is kind of cool in that we can just kind of stop if our opponent maxes, especially in situations like that, and it's completely fine. Like, I have no issues with that. Last game here, as soon as it wants to connect, there we go. This game is actually against Gaia Knight, of all things. I never really thought I'd see this deck, especially, you know, I gotta give props, you know, if the guy's trying to get all the way to Plat 1, which, I mean, if they're at Gold 5 this early in the season, they might have been, and they probably were in Plat, they might have even been at Plat 1. You know, props if they made it there with Gaia Knight and they're going to do it again. This is a bit of a weird Maxi. My opponent's going to play it in response to the field spell here, which I don't particularly understand, honestly. Some people just Maxi at the weirdest times. We're going to get Raye so we can go into some plays. And here, since it's turn 1, I am actually going to want a special summon. We're going to go into Shizuku. It's fine if we give our opponent 1 draw here. I don't think the difference of 1 card is going to make a whole lot of difference, unlike the end of the last game. And we're definitely going to want to add Engage. Our opponent's going to just set 1 card and pass, which is interesting. I think about Harpie's Feather Dustering here, but I decided not to. I decided if it's only 1 back row, let's just play it out. If the 1 back row happens to be Wild Tornado, of all things, okay. This destroys a face-up spell or trap card in the field, but then I get to set a card, which I'm not going to do here. I'll go ahead and activate the field spell to try to get my Chalice in the graveyard, but unfortunately I'm not able to set up my 3rd spell for Engage that way. Since I didn't reveal a Sky Striker monster, the card I selected for the field spell doesn't get sent to the graveyard. So I'm going to have to link away into Hayate to send a spell away, and now I can Engage for the search plus the draw. But yeah, Wild Tornado, especially in what we're going to end up seeing as a Gaia Knight deck. Again, I would not have expected to run into our opponent like this, you know, in Gold rank this early in the season, but hey, if it's working for our opponent, that's, you know, more power to him. we're going to want to add Hornet drones with the Shizuku we go into during the end phase here, so that we can set up some potential plays if they do end up having something this turn. I decided to max C instead of Ash Blossom in response because I wasn't particularly concerned with what my opponent was going to be able to bring up, or bring out rather, especially because we have some effect negations. I will stop them from adding a Gaia Knight spell or trap, mostly because I don't know what any of them do, and I don't want to risk losing to a random spell that was totally preventable. Plus, the Curse of Dragon Retrain is in defense mode, so I'm not concerned with giving it 400 attack. And here I'll actually, the reason I kept this game, even though it's kind of like a non-meta deck, is I wanted to show you how you can set up a kill in a situation like this, right? So we're going to blow away our opponent's back row first, then we're going to link away our Raye into Kagari. We're going to use Kagari to get back engaged and just get a massive amount of advantage in our hand. And then after that, we're going to end up using our Hornet drones to go into a Zeke. And we're also going to end up using our Widow Anchor to steal control of the Gaia. So basically, the plan is Zeke is going to banish away the Curse of Dragon so we don't have to attack over it. Then, obviously, we're going to want to use the Widow Anchor before we use Zeke's effect, because we're going to use Zeke's effect on the field spell to summon a Sky Striker from our main deck to our main zone. Now, our opponent ends up conceding there, but we did have to Widow Anchor first, because if we'd used Zeke on the field spell first, then we would have had a monster in our main zone, and we wouldn't have been able to activate Widow Anchor. But, yep, that's going to be enough to go for game in that scenario, and yeah, that's all the replays I got for you with this deck so far. Again, this is another deck where I'm not really quite in the same comfort zone as I am with like Tri-Brigade Zodiac. So I think I am going to be climbing with Tri-Brigade Zodiac for the majority of my if not my entire climb up to Plat 1. I might splice in some Bird Up and some Sky Striker duels here and there. But I do plan on mostly climbing with Tri-Zoo to get back up to Plat 1. And then once we get to Plat 1, maybe by then, ideally I've gotten some more Ultra Craft points. Maybe the game's economy will have gotten better. But in any case, that's going to do it for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. As always, this is Hexlex, signing out. Have a good one.